Good day. My name is Tanabari Kabu. So we're diving into part 2 of our mini course within Salesforce's Object Query Language, SOQL. And now we're diving more into the syntax of SOQL, right? So we can understand how to structure our queries and how to actually write queries, right? There are a few standard or required syntax for writing your queries. The most basic one, or the starter, is select. Let's just read Salesforce documentation as always. So SOQL query syntax consists of a required select statement that specifies the field to query. The field list in the select statement specifies the list of one or more fields separated by commas that you want to retrieve. So essentially, as I stated, select is always required within all queries that you write. You can think of select as selecting the fields that you want to see within your query, right? So if you're on account and you want to see account name, account type, those key fields, you would write those within your query. Let's look at our first example of a query. You see select is a required statement, right? And then we have our fields list afterwards. So fields come directly after select, right? So in this case, we have only two fields. We have ID, we're selecting the ID, and then name. We haven't got a chance to dive into from, but from is also required as well. From lets us state which object we want to pull these fields from. In this case, our object is account, and we can pull from standard and custom objects. We're pulling from account in this case. So this is our first example looking at query language. Let's dive into some more syntax and let's look at the where clause within SQL. So next, let's dive into the where clause within a Salesforce query language. So let's read through our documentation. So the condition expression in a where clause of a SOQL query includes one or more field expressions. You can specify multiple field expressions by using logical operators. How I think about where, from my point of view, is more of a filter, right? So you could kind of specify or break down your criteria further using logical or comparison operators to filter your data to your liking. So let's dive more into what that actually looks like and what that means. So we're going to our comparison operators. These are things that we're typically familiar with. We have equals, not equal, less than, less or equal, greater than, or equal. We're familiar with these operators that compare. For instance, if you wanted to see field names, like say, for instance, if you wanted to count that name that equals this specific syntax, right? This is a specific name. We could do that in that way. Or we have not equals as well. We also have logical operators, something that we should be familiar with. If you have a filter or you're leveraging your where clause and you want to check if both expressions are true, and then you also have the option to validate if at least one of the expressions are true. So that is your logical operators. Let's dive into our date format and date literals and where, right? So these are great because we could kind of filter our data using the where clause in our queries to be able to pull data for, say, a specific time frame. So in this case, we're looking at created date. So we want to see accounts that were created after this specific date here, 2005, October 8th, right? So yes, we can leverage, we have here's another great thing about date operators is essentially you're able to kind of write your queries based off like this type of text. So if you want to see accounts that were created yesterday, accounts that were not created today, you want to see opportunities that are closing tomorrow. So those type of things you can leverage with the date, last 90 days. So those are awesome as well. I'll dive into our NULL operator and where I love NULL. This is a perfect example of a NULL query that I would write. Select ID from case where contact last name. So if there's a contact but the last name is blank or null, we would be able to pull that data. You see how it's leveraged as a filter to break down your data in a specific way to see specific records. It helps you get a little more granular. That is our initial look at syntax that I leverage. We're going to dive more into some more syntax as well. Let's take a look at order by. So let's dive into order by. That is another syntax that I leverage as well within SOQL. Essentially is being able to order your data by a specific field. So, and you have four options here. You could either do it in ascending order, descending order. You could dive into your nulls first, or if you would like to see your nulls last, you could do that as well. Here's an example of a query that leverages order by. We have select name, which is our field, of course. Industry is also our field. From our object account, and then we have the syntax ordered by. And we're in this case, we're ordering by industry. We aren't, doesn't look like he's using, or they're using ascend or descend, or null first or null last. So that's optional. In this later example, they show you that you could use descending and also nulls last here. So great syntax there. And last but not least, limit. This is something that I leverage as well. Essentially, limit is an optional clause that can be added to a select statement of a SOQL query to specify the maximum number of rows to return. You could limit the amount of data that you retrieve. So if you have 10,000 accounts within your org and you only want to see 100, you only want to see 10 records. You have the option to limit that. As you can see here, we have the option to limit accounts to 1 within that query. This is a quick dive into syntax. There's so much within syntax and SOQL. We won't dive into everything. Those are some of the more basic and day-to-day things that I leverage in my queries. Next, we'll dive into a few examples where you can see how powerful queries are and get your feet wet within the query language.